So essentially, the facts are that we have this magnet school that had an admissions composition that was majority Asian. So this is one of the most prestigious magnet schools in America. This is one reason why we're talking about it. It through its prior admissions, its prior admissions practices, it would have classes that might be 71% Asian American. White students would be the 19.5%. At some point, there were so few Black students that they didn't account for even a percent. So it was deemed too small for reporting. 10 or fewer Black students had been in extended offers of admissions for TJ's class of 2024. So the school board decides, well, we're going to revamp the admissions criteria. Now, what makes this interesting to me is it is not that, there's no rule that says that once at a certain kind of admissions standard has been set, then you have a constitutional right to that admission standard now and going forward, because changing the admission standard might change the racial composition, and therefore changing the racial composition is going to be presumptively racially discriminatory for whoever sort of lost ground. That's not this case. That you don't have a constitutional right to a status quo admissions standard. The question is, was this enacted for the purpose of diminishing Asian American representation, quite specifically? And if it was enacted to target Asian Americans, then it's going to be subject to strict scrutiny and it's going to lose. If it was, hey, we want to increase socioeconomic diversity, or we want broader representation of all the various schools in the district, or something that is not related to racial targeting, then you're going to have rational basis review, where you're going to have, it's going to be the state's almost always going to win. And this is sort of what happened in this case. You had the two ships passing in the night, the majority saying, this wasn't about race. This wasn't about targeting Asians. And the dissent going, what are you talking about? This is entirely about targeting Asians. And the racial composition was front and center throughout this entire process. And so those are the two competing frames. And the majority here took the view of, this was not about race. This was not about targeting Asian Americans. This was changing the admissions composition or admissions criteria for totally different reasons. And the dissent said, no, this was all about fewer Asians. So that's what turned something into invidious discrimination. Invidious discrimination is when you're saying, this racial group, we need fewer of you. That you don't get much more clearly, starkly invidious than that. This is a situation where, and this is going to be very important if the Harvard UNC cases come out the way I expect that they will. We expect that they will. These cases are going to say, look, explicit racial targeting, explicit racial sorting is for diversity purposes just is not going to cut it anymore. No more of that. And so what you're going to have is a whole bunch of institutions going back and saying, what are the race neutral, race blind ways to achieve diversity? And so you're going to have a second layer of litigation that says, well, wait a minute. If you were seeking to achieve diversity by targeting a specific racial group for negative treatment, that's where you're going to have a problem.